Hello everybody and welcome back. Today we're talking about buffers. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you're new here, please like and subscribe if you like what you're seeing. Let's dive right into it. So I recently built a new pedal board, and I did my best to try and make it so that the back looked really pretty, like you see on all the Instagram videos. And in doing so, I added a lot more cabling than I was used to, because that's kind of what you have to do if you want all the cabling to run in straight lines. In addition to that, I added some new pedals, and I noticed that there was just kind of a significant drop in tone when it came to, my guitar going directly into an amp versus going through the pedal board first. And obviously we can't have that. So I decided to do an experiment that I've kind of been wanting to do for a while anyway. And I decided to test out whether or not buffers were really that important to your pedal board rig. So let's get into that. But first, let's talk about what a buffer is. A lot of people refer to a buffer as like the least sexy pedal you can get, and I understand why. It's because it doesn't usually have a foot pedal. It's actually just something that almost acts as a mini amplifier, where it takes your guitar's signal and it amplifies it. The reason being that if you think about how we operate as guitarists and the amount of cabling that you have to run to get from your guitar to your pedal board, all of the different cabling that goes in between the pedals and all that sort of stuff, and then the cabling that runs from your pedal board to your amp, it's a lot of cabling. And the more cabling that you introduce, it causes tone suck. It dilutes the signal. There's a great video where Josh Scott from JHS describes this, where he takes a water spigot and turns on the spigot, and then he plugs a hose in, and you see that when the water goes through all of the 50 foot of hose, the pressure of the water is not as high as it would be if it were coming right out of the spigot. So that's what these buffers will do, is they will essentially take your guitar's signal and they will push it through, they will add more to it and amplify it so that it gets pushed through all of the many pedals that you might have on your board stronger, and also come out of the back end stronger as well. So that's what these buffers do. Now, the next thing that we have to understand is that there are some pedals that have buffers and some pedals that do not. This is why you see pedals that refer to themselves as true bypass. True bypass means that there is no buffer in that pedal. You can tell if these pedals are for sure true bypass if you unplug them from their power supply, or you take out the batteries and you plug your guitar into it and you still get signal passing through. If you plug it in and there is no signal passing through, it means that that pedal requires power and therefore is adding something into the signal, some sort of buffer to push the signal through. All Boss pedals have a buffer naturally. A lot of the UAD pedals, if they're the smaller bodied ones, like the 1176 that I have on my pedal board, it has a little switch where you can choose if the buffer is on and off. And on their website, it says if there is no switch, then it has a buffer. TC Electronics is another one that is pretty notorious for putting buffers inside their pedals that you can turn on and off via internal dip switches that are found once you take the back off of the pedal. Each manufacturer and pedal is going to be a little bit different, so make sure you read up on that with your specific pedals. Now, regardless of all of these different buffers that you have on your pedal board and the ones that I even have on mine, it turns out that there's kind of a rule where once you get past a certain amount of cabling, and that's usually bigger boards, probably boards that are longer than just one line of pedals, I would say, could be wrong. You let me know in the comments about that. Once you get past that threshold where you're starting to stack pedals, most people will tell you that it's a good idea to start looking into adding a buffer or two to your signal chain. However, they say there are a couple of rules, so let's go over those. The first rule is if you have any vintage pedals, specifically vintage wahs or vintage fuzzes, you really want to put the buffer afterwards, as those pedals tend to operate better when they see your guitar's signal first instead of seeing a buffered version of your guitar's signal. The next thing that a lot of people say is no matter what, you should probably just never put it before a fuzz. So that's something that I tested today, was to see if that really makes a difference. You can obviously see that later on in the video. And the third rule that people tend to stick by is you usually want to put one buffer at the beginning of your chain and one buffer at the end of your signal chain. Now, there are a lot of different types of buffers that you can buy, and that's not really the video that I wanted to make today. There are a lot of other channels that have done that. I wanted to do what I haven't really seen, which is if I put one buffer at the beginning of my signal chain, does that make a difference? If I put a buffer at just the back of my signal chain, does that make a difference? And so that's what I got into. I also wanted to put a buffer before my fuzz and after my fuzz and see how that really affected the signal. And so that's what we're getting into now. So here's how the video is set up. There are two main sections, a clean section and a fuzz section, and each of those sections is split up into two different licks. One of them is a chord-based lick, and the other one is a single note-based lick. This is so that you can kind of hear how much it affects each part of your playing. In each of the clean clips, you'll hear what the guitar sounds like going through the pedal board to the amp, what the guitar sounds like going directly to the amp, and then all the various combinations that you can think of. What if there's one buffer in front? What if there's one buffer in the back? What if there's a buffer in the front and the back? Because I was also testing the impact that a buffer can have on fuzz in this video, I also decided to throw in the clean section what it would sound like with the buffer in the middle of the signal chain, specifically after the fuzz pedal. In the fuzz section, all we hear is the pedal board with no buffers and fuzz turned on, and then we hear a buffer in front of the fuzz, a buffer behind the fuzz, a buffer in front of the fuzz and at the very end of the signal chain, and a buffer behind the fuzz and also at the end of the signal chain. I also think it's important to note that I know that most people aren't really playing open chords in fuzz, but there was this little OCD portion of my brain that needed all the same things being tested, so that's what I did. I also want to mention that within the signal chain, there are some pedals that have a buffer already. So this is really testing kind of what a standard board would look like. No matter what, I think if you have a board that has more than 5 pedals, chances are at least one of them, or more than likely 2 or 3 of them, have a buffer in them. So that's what we're testing here is one in the front and one in the back really that important? For all information on my signal chain for any of these, you're welcome to go down to the description below where I detail out where each pedal is, what each combination looks like, and that way you can kind of understand where is the buffer sitting, how much cabling is it going through, what all is it passing through, and you can see that for yourself so you have a little bit more information of what each signal chain is set up as you hear it. I do recommend using headphones so that you can really hear what's going on. Without any further ado, please go ahead and take a listen to all this, and I'll give my thoughts at the end. All right, so let's talk about what we heard. First things first, there is some definite tone suckage, right? You can hear the difference between the pedal board with no buffers and the amp direct in. The amp direct in is clearer, brighter, has a little bit more oomph to it. And unfortunately, I don't really feel like any of the combinations got back to that full oomph and that full warmth that came from the tube. It got very, very close though, particularly with the buffer at the front of the signal chain and the back of the signal chain. I would also say that I was pretty surprised at how the fuzz did tend to handle the buffer pretty well. It was a little brighter, but I mean, you could always just roll off the tone knob. I don't know. A quick note on the fuzz pedal that I was using, it is the Class Reunion by Summer School Electronics, and it's their take on an op-amp style distortion pedal and a 90s Russian Big Muff, and so I had it all the way on the 90s Russian Big Muff side, so it was a fairly traditional fuzz for all intents and purposes. For me, I personally felt like I think I will put a buffer on the front and a buffer in the back, and I will run a buffer into my fuzz because honestly, it didn't color the effect enough to really warrant losing that much tone when it was sitting behind the fuzz in the middle or the middle and back section. I was also fairly surprised at how much it didn't really affect the single note licks. It was more about the open chords. Now that may have been different if I had played something that had more high-end notes or more low-end notes, but for the most part, the only thing that I really heard was maybe a little bit less in terms of that thumpy attack that you get from the Duchess and from those British style amps. So here's what I think. I think that we can confirm that buffers are important, that they do make a difference in your tone. And I bet if maybe I did some more research and maybe tried some more expensive buffers or something like that, I could probably get that full oomph that I get when I go directly into the amp while going through the pedal board. I also think that for me, it didn't really make that much of a difference for the fuzz, but that you should probably try it out with your own fuzz because maybe, you know, it affects different fuzzes differently. I only had the one fuzz pedal that I tried. Maybe I need to make a whole video where I try every fuzz pedal that I have with a buffer in front of it and behind it and see what happens. I also think it's important to say that I did have 25 feet of cabling going from the guitar to the pedal board and then 25 feet of cabling going from the pedal board to the amp, which is ridiculous. I don't know that I really use that at a regular gig, but I also kind of wanted to put these buffers through their paces and see what they could get away with. Maybe by shortening one of those cables, it could have helped improve that oomph that I felt like I was lacking. But what did you guys hear? Have you ever done your own experiments with buffers? What is your favorite go-to buffer? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. It's so great to see you guys again. Happy New Year. It's going to be a good one. I'm really excited and looking forward to all the content that I have coming your way. Thank you for following with me on this journey. For those of you who have been here now, I think this video officially marks a year since I released my first video. So thank you so much for being here. Please like and subscribe if you're new and enjoyed what you're seeing. It does help me and it does, you know, make my day a little better. But even if you can't like and subscribe, please go make someone else's day better. Once again, my name is Mac Wright. Thank you so much. We'll see you around.